All right, y'all. We'll go ahead and get started, and folks can join in and catch up. We also will be recording this workshop so that you can go back and show your young people later on. And yeah, welcome to the first Discover Career Chat of 2024. Discover stands for Developing Immersive Synergy at the Clubhouse in VR. I'm sorry, among clubhouses in VR. And it's our initiative, of course, that's part of our innovation umbrella. And it's our initiative where we are exposing the network to creative uses in VR, career paths, and just experiences. The four pillars, just to remind you for 2024, that we try to, are kind of our goals with the program, is to have coordinators and young people experience just VR in general as one of the main pieces. We also want young people to work on the creative tools and be exposed to and start utilizing creative tools. So that's just not about all gameplay and that sort of thing, which is cool too, but not that it's just all about that. And then we also want to, another pillar is to connect the network way more. So we have a lot more touch points among different clubhouses and collaboration, conversation, that sort of thing, than just our annual conference and our regional conference and teen summit. And the last one, which is what brings us here today, is to expose young people to the careers, the breadth of careers and educational pathways, just exploration that's out there in the field today using in VR and AR. So that brings us to today, who we have. Our special guest today is Joey Khamis.
Khamis.
Khamis. Sorry, I'm always trying to put an accent on it. But Joey Khamis, a super accomplished sneaker designer. I won't steal too much of his thunder, but he has designed for a variety of and done collaborations for artists, won some awards, has some keynote speaking opportunities that he's done, and has what drew us to him is his work actually in VR, designing and exploring some things in VR to design footwear and sneakers. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Joey.
All right, thank you. Yeah, like you said, my name's Joey Khamis. I'm a footwear designer. I'm just gonna share my screen real quick, and we'll kind of go into everything I have to share about how I designed footwear and how I got here and how to get into it. So, assuming you guys can all see my screen now, full screen presentation. Cool. All right, awesome. So, just a little bit of background about myself. I'm born and raised in Indianapolis. I grew up here, lived here most of my life. I'm actually back here now, but I've kind of bounced around across the country for different design jobs that I'll kind of get into in a little bit here. Most recently in Boston, but now back in Indianapolis. And some of the just kind of contextual things that about me that kind of connect to this talk and my career path is I've always had an interest in art, sketching, drawing, all that sort of stuff. Even just tracing, drawings out of photos of magazines of basketball players or football players and trying to recreate that. Just doodling, sketching, all that kind of stuff is just kind of in my background. I was the student that I was always taking any art class I could find, whether it was digital art, drawing, painting, sculpture, all that kind of stuff. And then, so I studied industrial design at Purdue University. Industrial design, another name for that, essentially is just product design. But it's kind of just at the more higher scale, like manufacturable level, is why that the name industrial, it always tricks people into thinking that we design like warehouses or something like that. That's not the case. So in my past like work experience, I designed at a company called Legrand. That was my first internship out of school, or I guess that one was during school. It wasn't footwear related. It was a lot of like in-home tech and like routers and Wi-Fi boxes, all that kind of stuff. Then I worked at Columbia Sportswear as an intern. I worked at Reebok as an apprentice, and then later on full time. I was there for several years. And then I put an asterisk next to Yeezy because I worked for Yeezy, sort of, not technically through the brand, but through Kanye West himself, and just kind of did some freelancing there. And that's kind of what kicked me off to uh, into freelancing into where I am now. Also, I'm realizing, I think, is this blocking, is this like side panel blocking the screen with the videos?
No, that's just on your screen.
That's just mine? Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure you guys aren't missing half the screen on me. Cool. Um, all right. So a little bit of how I got into design and how, I went from this career path from going from Purdue to freelance footwear design now, where I am now. So I didn't really see a clear direction to go with all the art stuff that I was doing. There wasn't necessarily a clear career path. People might suggest graphic design or, something like that. And I wasn't interested in enough in being an engineer, although I had some of the skills for it. I was, pretty good in like doing some math and enjoyed the science classes and all that kind of stuff, but it wasn't something I wanted to go into. And at Purdue is where I took those that first semester was a lot of experimental, of part industrial design classes and part engineering. That's where I really found that mix of the art and the engineering and development side of things kind of mixed into product design. And so product, and the what was such a good mix of that is the definition of product design. It's a mix of problem solving and art, more so leaning into the problem solving thing. Obviously the thing that you're designing has to function, but also making it, the form match that function, and also like look nice and, look good for, whatever the situation that it's in. And especially footwear, looking good is sometimes just as important as the function, although it still sits behind function. So a little bit more in depth of what industrial design is. So it's basically the process of design applied to products to be manufactured. That's kind of the very direct, dictionary definition of what industrial design is. Although it involves a lot of other things in that design process of using sketching and mock-ups and prototyping, and just any sort of way that you can communicate your ideas out clearly. And although I am in footwear design, which it is, it's a product, it lays under the industrial design category. There's so many different routes you can take with industrial design degree or background. And I'm going to get into a little bit more of those later too, at the end of this. But yeah, I mean, you can go anywhere from, automobile design to tech devices to, razor blades to toothbrushes to furniture. I mean, you name a product, anything that's sitting in front of you, your cell phone, a desk, a VR headset was designed by an industrial designer, most likely, or, that and within a team of engineers and developers as well. But essentially all it is solving problems with design. That's like the basic kind of definition of what this my job is, and it's just applied to footwear. So a little bit more about where I studied at Purdue University. The major I did, like I said, industrial design. And so some of the things that that program kind of teaches you is learning how to create technical drawings so that the factory knows how to make your designs. It's not just sketching a bunch of designs and there's not much you can do with just a sketch of an idea. You don't know if it works yet. You don't know if it looks right in person. You have to figure out how to you have to learn and know how to create those technical drawings to share to the factory so that they know how to make your product. Like I said on my last slide too, problem solving and communicating your ideas. The one thing that you really learn is that you might have all these ideas and you sketch them out and they might look good and cool, but the sketches might be really expressive, which is important to kind of capture that sort of energy and that links with the story that you're trying to tell with this product. But you have to also, communicate it in other ways, because you're not just sharing it with other designers, you're sharing it with engineers, you're sharing it with marketing people, you're sharing it with developers, and then, like I said, the factories. So there's all these different people that have different mindsets and different ways of interpreting things and drawing. So learning how to not only solve that problem, but communicating your ideas clearly to different people is a very key thing. Like a lot of the sketches here you'll see on the right, some of them are very loose notebook sketches that are just me working out ideas and experimenting with concepts, and just kind of getting my ideas out on paper. And then some of the other drawings on the left are a bit more like technical and precise, and those would be things that would be later translated to digital drawings that would be sent off as sort of like a blueprint or technical drawings, which we call tech packs. And so Purdue is where I discovered industrial design, is where I discovered the footwear design career path. I didn't think footwear design was, it just didn't click to me that was a thing that you could do. And it, but, I'd seen some other, senior students had done projects related to footwear, although, my program didn't have much to offer in terms of sharing about or teaching about footwear design specifically. But it, through those like classes and meeting different professors and teacher assistants and all that, I came across a school called the Pencil Footwear Design Academy, which is now a college. It's called Pencil Lewis College. But they had these shoe design contests where you kind of just submit online, and it was a voter-based contest. But anyway, that was how I figured out footwear design was a thing, and it was through this program that I got introduced to it. So yeah, like I mentioned, the Pencil Academy, that was where I kind of got my real start in footwear design. It was first off, like I said, just doing the online sneaker design contest, just drawing a side view sketch of a shoe, and submitting just that, and getting that was what was got chosen to a top 64, and then it was kind of like a March Madness bracket voting scenario from there. Every round people voted on the best shoe. I never won those contests, but this is what got me open the door to footwear design, and specifically the Pencil Academy. The Pencil Academy, by the way, was founded and started by a former Nike Jordan footwear designer, Dwayne Edwards, and he still he runs the whole school and teaches classes about footwear design. So that it's become, from a small studio like classroom in Portland, it's now an entire college based in Detroit now. So my first like real experience with that Pencil Academy was the Pencil New Balance footwear design master class, and that was taught by Dwayne Edwards at New Balance at their headquarters in Lawrence, Massachusetts, near Boston. And so that was like a 3-week crash course on learning footwear design. And I had kind of, because of my industrial design background, I knew a lot of the steps of product design and like problem solving and getting a brief and the design process. But it's where I really learned all the how to apply that process to footwear design, learning the construction of footwear, learning about different materials, learning how to work with color designers and marketing teams and all these different parts that go into footwear design. And, designing, even for like a signature shoe for an athlete, like trying to do the storytelling of making a meaningful shoe that also works, looks good, and like kind of this perfect combination of a great shoe design. And the New Balance concept on the right is the one that I had submitted for the contest. That was me. I did that after going through all of Purdue. That was like the summer after that. So that sketch is the result of a lot of practice and time spent on understanding footwear proportions and just sketching skills in general. So my sketches definitely looked a lot more rough going into those first years, and it's I think something important about that, just as a side note, of the sketching, you don't have to be this like perfect, amazing artist or someone that can draw amazingly well, as long as you can communicate those ideas. And there's always ways to get better at those types of skills anyway. So some of my, just going into my previous work, I worked at Reebok. That was my first full-time job after the apprenticeship that I had. I got lucky enough to work on some really cool projects. One of the first shoes I designed on the classics footwear team was the Classic Leather Cardi for Cardi B. So that was a very like it was like one of the first projects I ever got to make, and one of the first shoes that I got to see go to market. But I worked on other classics footwear. The shoe on the right is another like high top sneaker that I designed while on the classics team. And on the next couple slides, I'm going to kind of go into more of, how these ideas actually come to life. It's not just like sketching a cool design, attaching it to an artist and a brand and making it and having it, come to life. There's a lot more that really goes into it. So this is some of the process behind that. A lot of sketching, a lot of prototyping, a lot of working out your ideas, communicating those ideas. Everything I said at the beginning, but this is the examples of that. All these sketches on the right are, from weeks of going back and forth with the other people on the design team and, project managers and marketing, and trying to figure out what the shoe should look like, and exploring different shapes and proportions and colors and different ways to color block it. And I think one of the things I wanted to point out on these sketches is, they all kind of have different, like a hierarchy on the page of like small to large or color and no color. And that's just an, one way that I was using to communicate, like whether these are more, better ideas or ideas I liked, highlight them there, or highlighting certain details and functions. Like a lot of the outsole pods are highlighted in different colors, because I think that was just going to be a really important design detail that you can use to color, bring a bold color pop that kind of matches the story that they're trying to Reebok is trying to tell with the shoe, for someone like Cardi B. And again, these sketches don't mean anything unless you know how to communicate them to make it. And that's where the things you just learn in industrial design and as a product designer, as a footwear designer. The photo on the left is the first prototype, 3D printed prototype of the sole, of what that would look like, just to kind of get an idea of how these sketches would look in real life, to translate, making sure that the idea is translating, to real life properly. And so there's a lot of steps that happened, of like blueprint drawings and technical drawings, to get from those sketches to an idea that looks nice and looks like a shoe, looks proportional, looks like a sole. And so here's a little bit more of those steps in between. The stuff on the left is some of the technical drawings that are like the behind the scenes stuff that would be sent to the, this stuff isn't really being shown to like marketing and the project managers like that. This is the stuff that as a designer you have to create to show to the factory so they know how to make it. Really precise lines, really precise proportions, calling out materials, calling out measurements, and just any other detail that you possibly can, to make sure that they have everything they need to make your ideas come to life. It sometimes gets lost in especially in footwear design, because it's such a fun thing to sketch. I think, at least in my opinion, I know a lot of people share that, other designers share that, but they can get lost in that. It's just cool to sketch them, and we forget how to communicate to make them. So that's such an important thing as a designer. And the image on the bottom right, that's like the first prototype we received, with some edit revisions on top of it. And it just goes to show you, like, even if they make it exactly how you said to make it, they still might either make mistakes, or you might have overshot on some things and made some mistakes on your end. And that's where all these rounds of iterations come into play. Drawing quick edits and changing measurements and really subtle details, like even this little, like just this subtle little line change here, or maybe the outsole needs to be a bit thicker. All those sorts of things are just part of the design process. And then I wanted to still throw this in at the top right corner. this really, really rough sketch. It's actually not one of my sketches. It was one of the other designers on the team that was with me. It was one of his sketches that was like one of the first ones where he really tried to just capture the whole, like the vibe, the emotion, the proportions, and all that, just in a rough sketch. Obviously, that the factory's not going to know what to do with, to make that, and no one's going to understand that as a shoe. But as a designer, that's where you're starting off to get how you can get from something like that to these sketches to a prototype to a full sample, and then to the final product ultimately. So another thing that I've designed and work on is 3D printed footwear, and that's a newer thing that has kind of come along with this company based out of Germany called Zellerfeld. This is just a rendering of the shoe, but it is a real shoe. It's a 3D printed shoe, fully wearable, durable, fits properly, all that kind of stuff. It fits similarly to, I guess, to compare it to like other types of clog footwear, like a Croc or a Yeezy, like foam runner type of footwear. But I just wanted to put this as an example of there's an industrial design as a career path, but then there's so many other branched off like career paths, like footwear design. And even within footwear design, there's, you can be on more of the fashion side, the more experimental side. You can be on, the inline side where you're just making kind of standard sneakers like I was at Reebok that kind of sit in that, rubber sole, leathers, upper laces, simple shoe, just different designs and markets and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things I'm going to get into regarding this is a lot of the process behind it, and something that I wasn't using as much at Reebok as I am now as a freelancer. And that would be the VR stuff, which I'm going to get into. So I had the Reebok stuff, doing the 3D printed stuff. And like I said, after Reebok, I did some stuff for Yeezy, and that was all contract work. And that's where I started doing freelancing and started my own design studio, just a one-man design studio at the moment. But I started Khamis Studio in 2022. And what I do basically is I design footwear for my own brand, like you just saw, the 3D printed stuff. And I also design for many other brands and collaborate with other brands. So it's basically this, different career path that you can take within footwear design, is taking your own route and being able to work for many different brands and types of footwear and types of product, as opposed to kind of being at a company and you're, maybe you want to be like, I just want to design classics footwear, or I want to just design running footwear, or I want to just design basketball footwear. And you have a job like that, and you're just constantly making new basketball shoes at a brand, on and on and on, and I keep doing that. So there's different paths to go. I've kind of had a taste of each one, and this is the one that has worked for me best, just from experiences. And one of the things that kind of where I come in from a different perspective and offer different like services within footwear design is using virtual reality as a communication tool. And it's really helped my work stand out, and also helped in my design process. Because, although I did like the sketching and all that stuff and the traditional way of making shoes, there was so much of what I, as a designer, I felt like I was missing on expressively creating my designs, and that's where VR came in. So I think that's just as a little side note of that. There's so many different tools that you can use, and when you're a student and you're learning all this stuff, sketching is very important for this career path. It's very necessary, but there's so many other ways to make things and come up with your ideas and different mediums to create that. There's some people that just cut up a bunch of old shoes and make mock-ups out of that and have amazing ideas, and they don't even need sketching. And VR was kind of that for me. It helped me just have my ideas come to life in a more intuitive way. So here's some like screenshots of my VR process, with some like overlays of kind of like what you see versus what I see. This is like kind of my view of like seeing the shoe floating in front of me in space as I'm creating it and 3D modeling it. So the software I use is Gravity Sketch. It's a 3D modeling software, but it's virtual reality based, and it's a free software. It's something that, you know, if you do have access to headsets, which I know can get expensive, although some of them are more reasonable. With the combination of that and the free Gravity Sketch software, it's fairly accessible, you know, design tools to be able to just pick up and experiment with and try, whether you're a student or, you know, been a designer for 10 years or so, whatever. But again, it just really helps me visualize my sketches because I'm using 3D files to communicate with the factory anyway. Or normally I'd be using drawings to communicate with a factory, and there's a lot of room for misinterpretation in that process, because they're translating a bunch of orthographic or, you know, side views, top view, all these different angles of the shoe, and they're just kind of guessing what it would look like as 3D. And so that's where VR, I think, is an interesting tool for a footwear designer, because you're designing a three-dimensional product, and it just makes sense to be sketching and working out those ideas in a three-dimensional space. So you know that if the shoe looks cool from the side view, maybe it looks really weird or off from the top view, but you're kind of able to use it as a tool to see everything at once and get kind of make those tweaks live, instead of wasting a bunch of time going back and forth with a factory. I'm going to exit out of this slideshow real quick just to show a quick video of what that process looks like. It's a little like time lapsed and edited, but just to kind of give you an idea of how I've modeled the shoe. And this is a shoe that we actually made in real life. So there's like the prototype. It's a little sped up and a lot of steps kind of cut out of it, but just I'll let it loop again, but just showing how you can sketch in 3D spaces, model, and bring that idea to a 3D printed prototype just like that. And I'll go back to this. But yeah, I just wanted to show that, just to kind of show how, I mean, like, it doesn't have to be this crazy complex shoe design and process and all that. But, you know, just the idea of going into virtual reality, designing a quick little thing, or even shapes, or making art with it, and just to be able to send that to a 3D printer and make a quick prototype or a sculpture, I think that's a powerful thing as a designer, and even as someone that's learning design, and especially, you know, for students as well, to see how their sketches, their digital sketches, and all their ideas can come to life quicker, instead of, you know, having to wait till you get a real job to see your products come to life. So a little bit more on that. This is again, some of those steps in between, from going from idea to actual shoe sample. On the left is some wireframe, like loose sketches that are in 3D. And then also some, you know, sketches that I did on just digital sketches. So it goes all the way from those sketches to some 3D models in VR, to sending those to a printer to make a prototype, and then the prototype ultimately giving you all the feedback you need to make a final product that looks good and looks how you imagined it. And so that's a shoe this is a shoe that I actually designed in collaboration with Gravity Sketch. So we used, you know, again, like you only use the tools that work for you and work for your process. But we used, for the sake of this project, we used Gravity Sketch and virtual reality at every step of the way from to make this shoe, all the way from the sketching to the working with the factory in VR as well, and sending them 3D files. So just to go to show you that there's many different ways that you can use your skills as a designer to be a footwear designer, or, you know, any sort of product. A little bit more of what that looked like from the working with the factory. Like I said before, you have to be able to make those technical drawings to be able to communicate your ideas, you know, with a factory or with other, you know, marketing, all these different people. And so this is the way that we communicated with the factory, but in three-dimensional space this time. So it was interesting, because instead of sending all these drawings, we sent them the full shoe. Like, we was like, this is what we want, this is how we want it to look like. We were able to use, you know, give them the opportunity to hide layers so they can see what the inside of the shoe looks like and how these parts come together. And it gave us better understanding of the construction and easily able to, label all the different materials and the parts and how they work together. And so this is kind of how we simplified that process of working, communicating our ideas in a different way to make our idea come to life. So that was my path into footwear design and kind of where I am now. And it's very different from a lot of other footwear designers, and no one really has, the more footwear designers I talk to and have worked with, no one really has a clear path. Some people didn't even go to school for design, but they just started sketching and got a job through, social media. But some went to, Pencil Lewis College and studied footwear design specifically there. Some went to fashion school, some went to industrial design school, some were, there's so many different ways. Some went to even art school, and it's translated to footwear design and product design as well. So there's many different ways to get into it. Like I said, you could study industrial design, you could go to an art or fashion college or university. There's the Pencil Lewis College, which is a footwear design college. And even there, within the footwear space, there's so many things that branch off to it. If you're into sneakers, but design might not be your thing, you could be a footwear developer, an engineer. You could be on the marketing side of it. You can be the project manager that's coming up with the ideas that the designers can make. There's so many different lanes. And I think Pencil Lewis College does cover that stuff, including being just the color designer for footwear and the materials designer for footwear, and then apparel design. And there's so many different things that you can kind of find what works for you within that, just in that interest space alone. And then kind of wrapping up from connecting back to the beginning of this, of the different footwear design careers, I've had a little taste of each kind. But just to go to show you, there's, if you work better at a brand, if you wanted to work at a big brand like Nike or Adidas or New Balance or, Asics, Saucony, name a footwear brand, and there's people designing shoes for that company. You could also go the route that I've gone, is freelance, working for multiple brands and having multiple clients and having a bit more freedom with what you do. Although that freedom comes with being able to sell yourself as a designer and get clients and keep bringing in work like that. So it has its trade-offs, but once you get to the point of, working, let's say at New Balance for so many years, maybe you want to take your own path. And I know these are big brands that might be sound very tough to get into, which they can be. And it's not like you can just easily get a job designing shoes at these brands, but there's so many tiers to that, and of different levels of brands, and you can work your way in from other products to work into footwear. That kind of sometimes helps be a better footwear designer, coming from a different background and perspective. And then there's also the option of working at a smaller design studio. There's a lot of those that I was, when I was living in Portland, a lot of those in that area of former, Nike or Adidas designers that have kind of started their own thing, and they work with their own clients, but you can be a designer within that, and you get a little bit more hands-on than you would at a bigger brand. You're involved in more steps of the process and working with your own clients and different product types and all that. So that's kind of the mix of the two. And there's, I think it just takes, trying different things out to figure out which one works best for the way you work and the way, the types of things you would want to design if you were a footwear designer. So, like I mentioned before, there's so many other things that you can do with industrial design, which I think is a cool thing about it. Because if you wanted to be a footwear designer, you can study industrial design, and if footwear design doesn't work out or you realize you don't like it, there's so many different ways you can, pivot that. You can design cars, you can design furniture, you can design tech devices. Like I said, any product that exists, someone designed it. And one of the things that a lot of industrial design, students and designers go into is working at consultancies, similar to, like I said, we're a footwear design studio where they have different clients. But even in this case, because it's more broad of just product design, you can often get a taste of designing. You could work at a consultancy, and one of your clients, you're designing, a bench that's supposed to be out in a public space, but then you're also designing a razor blade or designing a table or designing speakers or designing headphones, all within one company. You have all these different clients. So there's just another way to kind of give a perspective of how design can tap into so many different interest pathways that you might have. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap that up and open it up to, I'll stop sharing here and open it up to any questions that you might have or anything that you might have wish that I covered or anything like that. So yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
It's not a question so much as an observation. It seems to me through that journey and what you were showing me, especially with that traditional kind of Reebok process compared to what you're doing now in your direction with your VR and your 3D printing. By doing that, it seems to me that you're pushing the whole medium forward as well. Like to me, it kind of looked like, coming out of the dark ages in a sense, like the traditional footwear designs kind of, and the way that it's looked it's always kind of been the same, but with the way that you're using that technology, not only are you using new technology, but you're pushing the whole medium into the space age, I suppose. And that's what it looked like to me when you were showing me the 3D printed designs. It looked completely futuristic compared to the Reebok ones that you were showing me, which I think is really cool, right? Like, just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that like I noticed when I was at Reebok, and the not every step of that traditional process like was interesting to me, or like if I was going to be doing classics footwear for another few years, I was going to lose my mind creatively of just making more like how many more versions of the Club C do you guys need, or how many versions of this shoe do you guys well, and they'll find a way to make them and sell them and update it. But yeah, so that was kind of my way of using different tools to come up with different help bringing different ideas to life. And yeah, kind of just not necessarily like basically using the traditional process and like switching things here and there of like what works better, what doesn't work better. There's still a lot of that traditional process I use, but just kind of mixing it in with new stuff to have a fresh take on it.
Cassandra, you wanna
Yeah. So hi Joey. So I had a question, two-part question. So the first part is so you talked a lot about your process, but how do you translate things that inspire you into design? So let's say, like, I don't know, you go to the aquarium and you see a really cool jellyfish and you want to make a shoe based off of that jellyfish. What's the process like, taking like just a rough concept that's kind of like nebulous and not like a shoe, and turning that into like an actual design that you can kind of work on and kind of build out to be this actual practical functioning thing? That's first part. And the second part is, what are your thoughts on AI, and does it have a place in the work that you're doing in terms of design and kind of coming up with those ideas?
Yeah. So for the first question, I think that's like one of the really cool things of design is finding something, if you're inspired by something and using that to influence the design of the shoe, like whether it's visually or functionally. I think one of the big things is functionality. Like you said, if you saw like something cool at the aquarium, like if you go, see a fish or a jellyfish that had a cool like feature or interesting thing to it, you can go and research later, like, why is it like that? Why is the color like that? Why is it transparent? Why do the tentacles move that way? And you can translate that from that research of bringing inspiration and be like, oh, well, maybe that's going to influence how the laces work or how the shape of the outsole work. There's so many things you can kind of use it to like kickstart the research of how you want it to apply to the design functionality. And that's just one example of so many different ways that inspiration can be translated to the actual final product. And then the question on AI. Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of people that have been able to sketch a rough rough pencil sketch on paper, take a photo of it, send it into some AI website, and and you can tell it colors, materials, all this stuff, and it'll create a beautiful render of it. And I think that's a huge thing, because sometimes it helps you just quickly visualize an idea and see what it looks like, and even quickly go through a bunch of iterations of what it could look like, just based off a quick sketch. Now, it's not necessarily saying that's a good design and it's going to work, because again, it's still a rendering. You have to figure out all the prototyping process, but I think it plays a really interesting part of coming up with iterations and saving time there, so that you're not, sketching 40 different, ideas out, when you can just tell it different ideas that you want, and then you can go from there and use your design skills to make it a good product.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. You got a couple in the chat, Joey. Start first. You got Carolyn. So this is to be expected out of this group that you're working with here. But when you showed those 3D printed shoes, I think there was a whole room full of people that was like, "Oh, we're making those." So she asked, "What 3D printer do you use?" Can I add? And I know that was through a manufacturing process to a company, but if you have any info or advice on that, and if I could add on top of that, do you know what kind of filament they were using? Is that like a TPU or like that? It must be flexible, right?
Yeah. So what they so the company I use is Zellerfeld. They're based out of Germany. They don't do like, you can't just like send them stuff and get a quick mock-up made of them. They're kind of more just on the production side, and working with brands to do that. But they basically have a really good version of a lot of the printers you could have, that you probably might have like in a school lab or something like that. They use a flexible TPU material, which is basically just just a plastic material. They also do stuff with it's kind of similar, but it more of like a foam like material that's getting printed. And it's the type of printing is FDM. I'm not gonna lie, I forget what the FDM stands for, but it's basically where it's similar to like a CNC machine, where it just has a nozzle and it has all these coordinates, and it's basically just printing things and moving up as it goes, as opposed to different types of printing like resin printers and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's one of those things where you could have a cheap or cheaper printer with a similar material and make a similar type prototype, but the quality of what they do is obviously just so engineered to perfection at this point. So yeah, does that help answer that?
I think so. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And that TPU is readily available too. Most people that have 3D printers in here can get that off of Amazon or
You
wherever.
can get everything off Amazon, and I mean, it's probably not that cheap, but it's I don't know how the filament goes. I don't print stuff much here myself. I usually send it somewhere to get printed, but yeah, you can get a printer from Amazon, and then the spools you basically just get a spool of the filament, and then some printers are simpler than others. Some are more, you gotta one of those guys that makes your own computer type of person that can build your own, customize it. But I think there's some that are pretty simple that you can figure out how to work out pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Nice, thanks. And then Alana's on here, says, "What's been your favorite design and why?" Are you asking like his favorite design he made, or in general? Okay, yeah, it was his favorite thing you worked on, I guess.
Yeah. That's tough. I mean, I think the 3D printed one is one of my favorites, just because I had full creative freedom on that. I was just designing it. Well, not designing it for myself, but for my own thing. So I didn't have any brief or specific market to hit. I kind of figured, I was like, I'm just gonna make something that is looks cool, something I would want to wear, or maybe wear in a more experimental and the fashion side of things way. And and that kind of finding the brief and the market through that, of putting it out there and finding who likes it, as opposed to designing something for a very specific like demographic or a brief that was given. But I think like at Reebok, I think the being able to help design in the Cardi B show was pretty cool, especially as a first project at the brand. It was I was pretty surprised they gave me the chance to do that. So
While people are thinking of their questions, feel free to raise your hand, jump in, or put it in the chat. But did you about the Cardi B? I was wondering as you're going through that, did that working with the artist like that? That's obviously like the spokesperson model. Did she have any input in your process? Were you like having to hear, you know, like this, hear her ideas and views, and then incorporate that in? What was that process like?
yeah, so that project didn't happen till it kicked off like early into 2020. So everything was, you know, offices were shutting down obviously and like closed, and everything was, that was when everyone was starting to do things on Zoom. So there wasn't as much interaction, at least from my end. They couldn't have, you know, there's 20, sometimes 20 people involved in projects like that, from all the way from the marketing to design to develop all that stuff. So they didn't want to have all these, you know, 20 people on a call with her and overwhelm the process. So I wasn't really involved in those directly. But yeah, so like we would come with like that page of sketches, a little bit organized a little differently. So they're more like, you know, options, like option 1, 2, and 3. And then she would kind of pick her favorites or talk about features she liked or colors she wanted to explore. Normally in a normal setting, you'd probably bring her into the office or meet her at somewhere and, you know, have big mood boards and presentations and, you know, present the whole thing like that. But yeah, so there's some feedback, but it's always interesting because you still always have to find that balance of like, they may have cool ideas or want to make something, but it might not hit the price point, or it might be cost too much to do something they want to do. So that's where there's a lot of back and forth discussion on that sort of thing behind the scenes.
It's interesting. Gus has his hand raised, and I'll tell you too, because Cassandra came through and gave a comment. Love how inspiration turns into research, turns into design. That's a great explanation of the industrial design process.
Yep.
Right on. Yep. And then Galen, I see you too. Gus, yeah, you want to come in and ask?
Yeah, fascinating work, Joey. This is really cool. I'd like to know, what was the process of you transitioning from, like, I guess 2D design interface to a 3D and using Gravity Sketch? And do you feel that this like whole new world of spatial computing and mixed reality, is that the future of product design? Or are we just ditching 2D design and in favor for 3D in-person 3D type of experiences? So that's something that I'm curious about, to learning from your experience.
Yeah, I mean, I still sketch all the time, even on like post-it note sketches or just on paper or digital sketches. And you know, sometimes I still often have to create some, I'll use like Adobe Illustrators where most people create the technical drawings. So I still use that for certain things if I can't explain it properly through just 3D stuff. I think that 3D is just another, especially with the spatial computing stuff in VR, it's just another tool of like what works better for you. Like I said, I worked with a designer at Reebok, and he's good at sketching, but he, every single project, he would just find old samples and cut shoes up and make new things and new concepts with that. And that was his way of presenting his ideas, and it worked. He was really successful doing that. So yeah, I don't think it's going to like completely replace the process. I think it'll replace certain things that are outdated or take too much time to do. And I think, as you could see with that video, obviously it's edited, so it looks a little clearer than what it looks like in the headset. But now the headsets are, you know, they're getting good enough where I can put it on and I can see my office and my desk around me with my prototypes. And I can also bring in the digital version of it, and it can float and it, you know, it seamlessly fits into that with the real prototypes versus the digital. And I think that's where it can come into like save time and just be more efficient of like comparing, okay, I got the sample and here's the digital file. If I just want to change the proportions of the tongue of the shoe, I can look at the real one, but make a real quick edit to the digital one, compare it in live time, send it to the factory, and not have this guessing game of, I'm going to make revisions to the 2D drawing, send to the factory. Hopefully it looks good, get it back. Oh, it doesn't, I have to make another change. So it saves a lot of time and materials and sampling and all that. I think that's where it's going to play the biggest part at this point. I don't think it's going to take over the whole process though. It'll just it'll sneak in where it makes sense.
Nice. Nice. And we're just under 10 minutes. We got Galen and Fran have a question in the chat, and then Alana has a hand raised. Galen and Fran are asking, when working with our young creators, would you direct them to a university degree versus, say, Pencil College, or did your university degree give you an edge as far as opportunity and access to companies?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, like footwear specifically, it's kind of different because it has that, it also blends into the art and fashion world a bit more than other product design. So you can become, if you're, if you're a rare case of like, if you're good enough and have really cool ideas, or you present your ideas in a creative way or have an interesting process, you can use social media to build your whole thing and get a job through that. I mean, my industrial design degree helped a ton with just understanding the fundamentals of design processes and sketching and all that. But it still took me to post sketches on Instagram and Reebok designers finding those sketches. And that's how I got my foot in the door. I got all my jobs from Instagram, but it had the backing of my degree and like the skills I learned there. If you're a student or a young like creative that doesn't know if they want to do footwear design, but it interests them, but they want to do design in general, maybe the industrial design route's better because you can always pivot to footwear design. If you went to pencil, and you realize you don't want to do footwear design or don't like it, that might be a limiting thing, because they're not going to, though, again, I was at pencil when it was a much smaller thing. So maybe it's a more well-rounded design process school now. So I think that's just a more like, if you're really fully set on footwear design, it makes sense. If you're questioning it, I'd say the more industrial design route probably makes a bit more sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that's really wise. Alana,
What
wanna-
are some, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, what are some, I have a two-part question, but for, what is some advice you would give like our young creators when they're feeling stuck or discouraged in their designs, or it's not coming out how they like envisioned it?
Yeah. I think one thing is to know that someone like me still struggles with that too. It's not like a thing you just figure out and it's gone. Like every single designer I know or artist I know deals with that. Like they're either in a creative wall or they're not figuring out how to solve this problem or whatever. I think sometimes for me, the best advice is just to, if you can and have the time, to step away from it for a little bit, work on another project, and something might just click, or just that time away might get your thinking process without focusing on it too much. But also just, I don't know, sometimes just going to the beginning of the whole project and thinking it for, like, if I'm trying to solve a specific problem or design, or like I'm trying to figure out how I can construct a shoe in a certain way to do a certain thing. Sometimes I'm only focusing on where I'm at in the process at that point. Sometimes I need to remember to go back to the very beginning of the thing and be like, okay, what was the brief of this project? Am I still solving the problem the same way? Maybe that'll open my eyes of like, oh, well, I tried to solve the problem, but I veered off course, and maybe now I need to dial it back to the problem I was actually trying to solve, and that might lead to new solutions, or even just going back and doing the ideation process or the research process again and trying to find different insights. Yeah, I think just trying to it's not a linear process, and just keep circling back until you kind of start finding new insights or inspiration or motivation to keep it going.
And then the second question kind of piggybacks off that. Are there any like activities or tools that you use to kind of get the ideas flowing, like the creative sparks that you may have?
And
Yeah.
before you answer that, Joey, Derek also asked, what are some other VR apps recommended for design? Maybe that factors into that answer as well.
Yeah. There's one, I don't use anything else. I haven't experimented with anything else, but I think there's one that I think it's literally called Paintbrush, and it's kind of a similar thing to Gravity Sketch, but it's more loose and artistic than, and that could help too. Again, to your question, like that could make you think in a different way, and your thought process might be coming out in a different way, in a more loose way, and as opposed to more dialed in and technical, and that could help, get through a rut that you're in. Sorry, could you repeat the second question that you had?
Oh, I was just saying, what are some like creative kind of like activities that you may use to kind of try to get the brain flowing, or try to get like some ideas to come up?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is, and this goes to any product that you're doing, but footwear specifically, try to, like I'll watch different like documentary, again, like to your question on like if you saw something in an aquarium, like documentaries on nature or something like that, or like interesting documentaries on other types of artists and things like that, and they might inspire you to like yeah, I think just that's the thing is like watching other processes in different creative fields kind of get you to think in different ways, or might inspire you in different ways. And sometimes if you're designing for a very specific thing, maybe like literally trying to do that. Like I mean, I got into footwear because I was into sports like running and basketball and stuff like that. So if you're just as an example, if you're designing a running shoe, probably makes sense to like at least try running, or experiment with running just to get insights, or talk to people that are in that. Yeah, I can't think of a ton of like other creative activities that I do to find that, but it's just kind of stepping outside of shoes, stop staring at shoes and stuff, because then you're just gonna try to want to make a shoe that exists already, or accidentally make a shoe that exists already, and just get stuck in that and not feel creative because you're comparing it to all these amazing designs that exist out there. So yeah, does that kind of help answer that? Cool.
Nice. And we're right about at the hour. Joey, are you jumping straight off at the hour? I want to make sure we let you go if you got to go.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a couple more questions, I can hang on for an extra few minutes. That's fine.
Okay. And then you have two more hands raised, and yeah, if you're cool with that,
Let's do it.
we're cool to leave the room open for those two questions. Anybody that has to hop off, thanks. We'll follow up with a recording and more info. Yeah, Jeff, you were first.
Yeah, this might be a real quick answer. So in your own personal work, I was wondering if you have a habit of designing or sketching, like an everyday habit that you kind of do, or do you wait on inspiration? Do you wait to get inspired to sketch or to design something?
Yeah, so I know I kind of don't sketch every day. I usually kind of only sketch if I have a quick thought and I have an idea and I need to just make sure I get it down before it goes away, or if I'm like fully embedded in a project and I'm at that phase in the project where I need to start sketching, that's when I go heavy on the sketching at that point. But I'm not one of those designers that's like always just constantly sketching ideas. But there's a lot of people that do that, and it's good, just especially when you're younger and studying and stuff. It helps just get those, really dial in on those skills so you don't forget them. But I'm at the point where I don't need to do sketch warm-ups every day to kind of remind myself all the technique and stuff. I've kind of developed my own thing, but yeah, so it usually when inspiration comes, I'll sketch.
Nice. And then Gus, you want to?
Yeah, just a really quick question. Do you know anyone that mixes also like, is there another designers that mix the design with like other elements like embedded electronics or things? I saw Nike once do like a self-tying shoe and things, and I just thought that was like a cool thing that you can mix electronics and other mechanical engineering with design. So just thought if you have any resources that you could point us towards, that would be cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know many. Sometimes it's funny because sometimes there's so many especially like student design projects will have like all these like I'm gonna implement tech into a shoe, and it's like a cool concept, but it's just like either won't work or too expensive or whatever. And sometimes even when brands do it like Nike, I think they did it that self-lacing thing where it was cool and it worked well, but I think it still has that like novelty to it where it doesn't, it's like cool, but it makes a weird noise when it does it, and you're gonna look weird or what. I don't know. So I don't know of anyone that's of resources to like do that. I know there's interesting things where it's like if you just put a simple chip where it's something you can, tap your phone to the side of it and it has all your running log miles for that shoe or any like stats or things like that. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think people have figured out how to make that practical yet. But that's where someone that's learning to design now or a student that person will probably figure that out eventually at some point.
Future. Man, amazing. Thanks, Joey. Jeff, I'm about to turn it back over to you to close up, but I will real quick say, since we're still here, Cassandra had a point that's a nice kind of capping point to this too, that said VR is a great way for Clubhouses to save some money on consumable prototyping materials, and sometimes kids want to just experiment with the idea before actually committing to an entire project. I thought that tied in really nice too with your, like, there's an access ability to this too, where you could design right on the headset, potentially print in-house, or like you have access to all these things that used to previously have all these different stages and gatekeepers, like you said. And also that tying in with the fact that you got so much of your big business through Instagram, it's all very self-makeable. So I don't know. I felt like that was worth noting, man. That's
a great point.
Yeah. Jeff. Yeah.
Completely agree. I think I just want to send a huge shout out to Joey for participating, just coming in, and to touch on what Matt just said. I mean, I think your background and how you got in, and the points you touched on from social media to the fact that you were an artistic kid, curious. I think what I got from it was that you follow your curiosity. That's all things that in Clubhouse Network we talk about, and that Clubhouses and Best Buy Teen Tech Centers all around the world are preaching every day. Be curious, explore, be creative. And so I just want to let everybody know on the call that we appreciate you all participating and joining in. This if you came in late, this session will be recorded, and we are going to keep in contact with Joey, and they're find some ways to keep that relationship going and possibly working. So I just thank you to everyone who joined. Appreciate you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
I
Thank
appreciate it.
you.
Very much.
Inspiring.
Oh, yes.
Mhm.
Great.